Ladies and gentlemen, 1990 government there was the have war na naru rwenzururu. Rebels naru za ataka government ze kilizemu. This war there was a Kirembe in the mountain there was not far with the Kirembe. Government there was they put their barracks, new barracks to attack to go to fight. They were they follow them to attack them fighting with each other. Now they come they attack them in the barracks. They attack government in the barracks. They kill them. Government they bring a lot of soldiers to go in the mountain to follow Naru to fighting each other. And they bring police, they put to this place who was living Kirembe. Police to want to check refugees they escape in the mountain to come to Kirembe to check them to see if na rebels they come with them to spy them, not to attack them terrorism. Nali to attack them ambush. This day they bring police. Police they come with the Muruka chief. They call all society, they call us to go in a meeting to listen how police they're talking with us, how we can make us ourselves security and to know we have police when we see something. Rebels to call police to come to catch them, and they're talking to give they want to go every door to ask them people money corruption. When they finished talking, they come to every door to ask money. They have to give them money. Society they have to give them RCs and police money. This time we have refugees, lot of refugees they escape in the mountain. I talking with them, the ones they ask money, they know how to force them when they don't have money. And I talking we have refugees. They don't have job, they escape there. Nazemu we need to help them, to care them. All of society they support. They say yes. When they ask money, they find someone that don't have money. They have to know they have society. They have refugees. Nazemu they need help. After police, they were the after one day they finish, they come, they attack me. They come with the RCs. This RCs one Muruka chief. RCs one they start to punch me. They put me in kabada all night. I'm a kabada. This kabada they were no different with the suitcase for clothes. Society. They go in they contact in the quarter police Kasese. They come morning 6 o'clock morning. They come to this detached police. They was put there detached. They was put me. They ask them why they put me. They take me in Kabada. I was no move or I was paralyzed. Police. Those police they catch this police na RC one they put they take them in the quarter, they put them in the prison. Me police they left me home while I was paralyzed. I can't walk. They say when I start to feel good. If I feel good, I go there in the quarter to make statement. And they told me all of society they finished to make statement those there was a call of them. I may have to go there when I'll be okay not to walk, to go there in the quarter to do statement. I go there, see the walk, I make statement. Tomorrow, they're saying tomorrow they're going to put them in the court. Tomorrow I wake up, I go to police to go in the court. After government RDC, he come, he take them out. He say go home. He talking to police, they're not allowed to take them in the police, in the court. After police, they give him advisor. They say go Fort Portal. They show me lawyer to come to follow my case. From this day, lawyer, he want this file. They never return this file to show him. From this day, I was waiting until 1097. 97 New Year, they come, they torture me. About this violence, they have with me, with the fire. Why them they use money to destroy fire. 1098, when they finished torture me, I go Kampala to get a lawyer. I decided to open this case, to put a lawyer and to follow this in my case. There was not to give him a lawyer, Fort Portal, or to take my case. One case there was human rights, and another case there was one case there was human rights. Na my lawyer, they were the follow my case all, and one case is the lawyer who was the follow this case only.
Or apply the redeeming understanding fast enough to save the human race from the imminent threat of our species' extinction, from terminal levels of psychological upset. As I will explain, the way we do this, and this applies both individually and collectively, is through the transformed way of living. But before I get into that part of this presentation, the first problem that has to be understood and overcome is the death effect, which I'll now explain. Part 2, the problem of the death effect. As I've described in my video booklet, The Great Guilt, and in other publications, the only way we humans have been able to cope with the unbearably depressing truth of our corrupted condition, while we couldn't explain it, was to deny its existence. As I mentioned, the great Greek philosopher Plato used the perfect analogy for this situation, where he described us as humans as having to hide deep underground in a dark cave where no light could get in and expose our corrupted condition. Well, Plato not only described how we have had to hide in this dark cave-like state of denial of our corrupted condition, he even predicted what would happen when no species to have ever lived on Earth. Now, there is an issue, and this is very important. Our species' great struggle is not yet over, because we still have to use or apply the redeeming understanding fast enough to save the human race from the imminent threat of our species' extinction. From terminal levels of psychological upset. As I will explain, the way we do this, and this applies both individually and collectively, is through the transformed way of living. But before I get into that part of this presentation, The first problem that has to be understood and overcome is the death effect, which I'll now explain. Part 2, the problem of the death effect. As I've described in my video booklet, The Great Guilt, and in other publications, the only way we humans have been able to cope with the unbearably depressing truth of our corrupted condition, while we couldn't explain it, was to deny its existence. As I mentioned, the great Greek philosopher Plato used the perfect analogy for this situation, where he described us as humans as having to hide deep underground in a dark cave where no light could get in and expose our corrupted condition. Well, Plato not only described how we have had to hide in this dark cave-like state of denial of our corrupted condition, he even predicted what would happen when one day someone puts together the redeeming understanding of that corrupted condition that liberates us, in his analogy, from having to hide in their dark cave. So, yes, so way back during the golden age of Greece in 360 BC, when writing in his dialogue, The Republic, about the time when someone escapes from the cave into the light of day and sees for the first time the real world and returns to the cave to help the cave prisoners escape into the sun-filled setting outside the cave, which symbolises the transition to the real world. Plato wrote that when the cave prisoner is forcibly dragged up the steep and rocky ascent, this is his actual words, out of the cave and not let go till he had been dragged out into the sunlight, in other words, shown the truthful, real, redeeming explanation of our corrupted, imperfect human condition, and he actually used the term human condition, the process would be a painful one, to which he, the cave prisoner, would much object, and when he emerged into the light, his eyes, this is very interesting, his eyes would be so overwhelmed by the brightness of it that he wouldn't be able to see a single one of the things he was now told were real. Significantly, Plato then added, certainly not at first, because he would need to grow accustomed to the light before he could see things in the world outside the cave. So that's amazing. Plato has said, what he said here is that when we humans are presented with the redeeming explanation of our corrupted condition, we would be so attached to living in denial of it that we wouldn't be able to see a single one of the things we were now told were real. And it makes absolute sense that we humans have been living in such deep fear of the issue of our corrupted condition that our first response is to not allow our minds to take in or hear what's being talked about. We suffer from a mental block, what we in the WTM have come to describe as the death effect. And I should emphasise that what an amazing insight Plato had. No wonder, A.N. Whitehead, one of the greatest philosophers of the 20th century, described the history of philosophy as merely being a series of footnotes to Plato. That's an amazing statement. Plato truly was a very great, denial-free, honest, effective thinker, or what humanity has termed a prophet. So yes, the problem of the death effect is very, very real. So it's certainly likely that at first you, the listener, won't be able to, as Plato said, take in or hear a single one of the things you are now told are real. Now, I know that saying that will seem like an impossibility. You'll think, Look, if this explanation is rational, I'll be able to understand it. But the problem of the death effect is actually true. I mean, you can read many real-life accounts of the death effect in The Great Guilt and in other publications. So everyone needs to be warned that they will very likely experience this extraordinary problem of the death effect when listening to the description and explanation of the human condition. So now, the great difficulty that this problem of the death effect creates is how can it be overcome? So how do we solve this problem of the death effect? Having lived in great fear of the issue of our corrupted condition, how can people overcome that fear enough to be able to look at and take in and absorb the explanation of our corrupted condition? And by so doing, discover that the all-relieving understanding that the corrupted condition has finally been found. How do they, if they can't hear it, how do they learn the benefits of being able to understand the human condition? Well, now, the solution to this problem of the death effect, the way people overcome it, is through being prepared to reread and or re-listen to what's being written or said. This process of rereading and re-listening to what is in fact a straightforward and clear presentation of growing accustomed to the light as Plato described it, erodes our historic denial and counters the death effect, allowing the compassionate and immensely relieving insight to become accessible. These are such good illustrations I gave in my 2022 presentation, The Shock of Change. I'm going to include them again here. The following is a good example of someone patiently rereading and re-listening to the explanation and overcoming the death effect. May Gibbs, the founder of the WTM Phoenix Center in Arizona, America, said, "I tried for months to get through the reading material, but my thought at the time was that it was super tedious and boring." Now, saying it was super tedious and boring is a typical death effect response. The subject of the human condition has historically been so unbearably confronting and depressing that most people's minds just don't want to engage with it. And so defensively and dismissively, in effect, say, "I'm not interested in what you're talking about. It's just super tedious and boring. Rubbish, meaningless rubbish as far as I'm concerned." Now, significantly, when May Gibbs persevered listening to and reading the information, eventually got through the death effect, she said, "I find it laughable now how deaf I was because here I am today, obsessing over the freedom essays, videos, and Facebook group posts. It has brought such peace to my life, and I have a burning desire to get it to whoever will listen." Okay, and this is another comment about how perseverance overcomes the death effect. It's from Melinda Greenacre on the WTM's Facebook group. She writes, "Hello, I'm a first-time poster. Something weird is happening that I thought I'd share. I first came across this book, Freedom, in 2017 when I downloaded the free version, but I couldn't get past the first few pages. Then, during the lockdown in 2020, I bought the paperback version for myself and my dad, but still couldn't get through the first couple of pages. It just didn't make any sense. I felt that the sentences were too long and rambling. Reading it made me tired. My mind would wander away every time, so I put it down again. But recently, in 2023, after seeing lots of WTM content pop up on social media, I started playing the main pinned interviews on the Facebook group in the morning as I was getting ready for work. A few tiny bits of information clicked into place. Nothing mind-blowing, but definitely a few aha moments. Today, I've been sitting at the bay waiting for my husband to finish a charity bike ride. I bought a coffee and thought it would be a good location to try reading the book again. In just over an hour, I've gone through 50 pages. I don't even remember why I found it so difficult. All of a sudden, it's making sense. I'm enjoying it. It's like I'm reading a different book." So the overall solution to the problem of the death effect, which has been such a big problem and has been stopping this all relieving and all-solving explanation of the human condition getting out to the world, is to patiently wait for a critical mass of people to appear who have managed to grow accustomed to the light enough to overcome the death effect, either through their own perseverance or having a real lack of resistance to the subject of the human condition. And for the relief and excitement of these people, to then inspire the rest of humanity to persevere reading and listening to the explanation of the human condition enough so they can also overcome the death effect and discover the immensely relieving and human race-saving understanding of our corrupted human condition. Part 3. The problem of the threat of our species' extinction from terminal levels of psychosis. Okay. Once the death effect can begin to be overcome, the problem then is, and like the death effect, this is also a very serious problem, can the human race benefit from the relieving understanding quickly enough to avoid the fast approaching threat of the extinction of our species from terminal levels of psychosis? So, now, the situation is that while the human race has finally managed to achieve the seeming impossible dream of reaching the seemingly unreachable star, of finding the redeeming understanding of our corrupted condition, it's now psychologically so exhausted, there's a very real possibility it won't be able to benefit from the 2 million year heroically fought for breakthrough understanding before it's outrun by and dies from terminal psychosis. As I explained in the interview, the history behind this unthinkable, horrific situation where the human race is now so psychologically exhausted that it faces the threat of extinction from terminal levels of psychosis, which this graph summarises, is that we humans have been becoming increasingly psychologically upset since we first became fully conscious species and challenged our instincts for the management of our lives some 2 million years ago. With extreme upset developing in the last 10,000 years or so when with the development of agriculture made it possible for large numbers of people to live close together in settlements, which greatly increased the occurrence and spread of upset. I mean, as the historian Manning Clark said, the bush, that is the wilderness, is our source of innocence. The town is where the devil prowls around. Now, this rapid increase of upset is what has led to the terminal levels of psychosis in emerging generations in the world today. This situation of the psychological exhaustion of younger generations is in fact very dire. They are so psychologically crippled and unable to cope with anything that they've been referred to as the snowflake generations. They've even described themselves as the burnout generation. In aspect 1 of my 2023 booklet, Our Meaning, I present an endless series of articles reporting on how the psychologically exhaustion everywhere now in the human race, but especially where it's so great that society is breaking down everywhere we look. And we are entering endgame, that is, for our species, a state of terminal psychosis. It's a very, very frightening and serious situation. So the following is a compilation of quotes from those articles, and if you look at my book, Our Meaning, you'll find the sources of these quotes. These reports speak of an epidemic of autism and exploding rates of bipolar disorder and ADHD and spiralling numbers of children with development delays and a tidal wave of mental health issues in the schools as anxiety, depression, self-loathing, fragility, sadness, hopelessness, suicide and self-harm. So these reports from across the world, that tell of how many of the younger generation are now finding it almost impossible to face the world, let alone work to earn a living. For instance, in Australia, it is reported that there is a silent legion of kids across our nation suffering from this psychological paralysis, where, as the organisation School Refusal Australia explained in a submission to Victoria's Royal Commission into Mental Health, the kids are isolated, often live in their bedrooms 24/7 and are unable to leave their home. They barely function. They feel guilty and ashamed. They've given up. This is not simply wagging, i.e. the skipping school, as earlier generations knew it. It's an extreme phobia. And further reports about the psychological paralysis of the young in Australia state that 1 in 5 teenagers struggle to read. Teenagers. And that the paralysis is so great, we've now got a population that doesn't want to work, and that there are thousands of businesses that just can't find staff, let alone good employees. Yeah, the chair of Australian National Broadcaster, Ita Buttrose, complained that millennials so lack resilience they need hugging. In China, it's reported that many of the young are now only able to do the minimum and feel they cannot find a way out of their predicament of not wanting to participate in the world. In France, a study claims that the country is now mired in laziness epidemic. This unwillingness to work at all has led to a huge shortage of labour. And in Japan, there is now an epidemic of shut-ins, the phenomenon of withdrawal from society. A report about Spain said that many young Spaniards have dropped out of education and work altogether, with no plans to resume study or to look for a job. And in the United States, it is reported that among the millennials, there is an epidemic of narcissism, a personality disorder where people try to boost low self-esteem, and that their self-centeredness could bring about the end of civilization. A survey in the US also found that a staggering 79% of business owners and managers find Generation Z the most difficult generation to have in the workplace, citing entitlement, a lack of effort, motivation and productivity. Some saying that interacting with them can be exhausting because they lack discipline and are too easily offended. So yes, the burnout generation is absolutely the right description for what's happening to the human race. In the case of politics, I need to first explain the basic situation that's involved in the political dialectic, which is that having had to deny the unbearably depressing truth of our 2 million year corrupted condition while we couldn't explain it, has meant that there's been no corrupted condition to have to be explained. So you're living in denial of it, so there's nothing to explain. So there's been no admission of our fundamental task and responsibility of having to participate in humanity's heroic battle to find the redeeming explanation of our corrupted condition. If there's no corrupted condition, then there's no corrupted condition to have to be explained. However, now that we can explain and defend our corrupted condition, we can finally admit the existence of it and therefore of humanity's great heroic meaning and purpose of having to find understanding of it, which, as I explained in my booklet, Death by Dogma, is a battle that the right wing in politics has supported with its emphasis on freedom of expression and and on the upsetting competitive, selfish and aggressive individualism needed to find the ultimate explanation. So admit our corrupted condition, and we finally have the reason for the right wing in politics. John Kenneth Galbraith, the liberal economist and advisor to the Kennedys, once mockingly said that the right wing are engaged in one of man's oldest, best financed, most applauded, and on the whole least successful exercises in moral philosophy. That is, the search for a truly superior moral justification for selfishness. Yeah, well, with the explanation for and resulting ability to admit our corrupted condition, that truly superior moral justification for selfishness that the right have been supporting is now revealed, along with the extreme danger of the left's freedom of expression and selfishness denying, dogmatic, deluded, pseudo-idealistic demands for a selfless and loving world. So while there's no corrupted condition to have to be explained, and there's no ability to effectively explain and justify the selfishness and competitiveness of the right wing, the attraction of the left's incredibly dangerous, pseudo-idealistic, let's all just hug each other, do good to make yourself look good and feel good, politically correct, woke culture has become irresistible, especially for those who are extremely psychologically exhausted from the effects of humanity's heroic battle to find understanding, namely today's younger generations. After the 2022 federal election in Australia, the Australian National University 2022 Australian Election Study found that only 1 in 4 voters under the age of 40 voted for the right-wing coalition, and only 1 in 5 voters among the Generation Z voted for the coalition. Yeah, in fact, there's many predictions being made in democratic countries that before long the right may never be able to win power again. A May 2019 article in The Atlantic with the title "Young Democrats May Control the Political Future" says that the right-wing GOP seems to be playing a losing hand, that it seemingly won't ever get back into power. I mean, the takeover by pseudo-idealism and with it the destruction of humanity is apparently everywhere upon us. You know, so thank goodness that what has actually been right about the right wing and what has actually been wrong about the left wing has finally been revealed. Better still, thank goodness the understanding that makes this exposure possible brings to an end the whole upsetting battle to find this all exposing and thus all relieving understanding.